Hello and welcome. I call the channel the Jungle Nook, and I primarily concentrate on tropical houseplants as well as natural themed aquariums. And this video here that I'm putting together is by request from some of my subscribers that were curious how I'm able to manage so many of these plants and keep them nice and lush and healthy. So I'm going to talk about a variety of things in this video. We'll discuss the pots and the soil, lighting, watering and humidity. We'll talk about insect and pest control, fertilization, just a bunch of different topics. You might be surprised at just how simple and easy it can actually be. But if I don't talk about something that you were interested in, feel free to leave a comment down at the bottom. I am a small channel, so it's no issue at all for me to respond to all the comments. And even if you don't have a question and you just want to share some information or an experience that you've had with your plants with me, feel free to. I do appreciate the interaction, and I'm not an expert. So I really enjoy hearing from other people who share the same type of hobbies and interests as myself. So what we're going to do, we're going to go out on the porch, and we'll start by talking about the pots and the soil mixture and stuff that I use, and then we'll come back inside and finish up. Let's talk about pots. So when you're picking out your pot, two of the most important things to consider is drainage and size. These pots right here, they have a little tray built right into them for drainage. This is one that I would be sitting on the floor in the house. And this is a hanging basket, and it also has a tray in there. So I can hang this right from the floor, or hang this right from the ceiling, and not worry about the water going out onto the floor. The size also matters. I like large plants, so I use large pots. I also don't want to have to keep up potting. But if you're going to use a really large pot, you got to be careful not to over water it and cause root rot. What I do to help mitigate that, I never use topsoil in a pot. Topsoil will retain way too much moisture, and when it gets wet and then dries, it will become hard and compacted, and the roots won't be able to grow through it. Plus, with topsoil, you have a greater chance of root rot. Always use a potting mix that is from peat moss or coco coir. This right here is mostly coco coir. And it comes with a slow release fertilizer, just like Miracle-Gro potting mixes and stuff. And what I will do, I will fill this up about maybe 2/3 of the way, and then what I'll do is I'll add a bunch of perlite to help with the drainage. That way I know the soil that's in there, the potting mix, is able to drain all the excess water out, and the pot, because of the tray, how it actually drains, I don't got to really worry about root rot. And then I just add a bunch of perlite right into there. I'm not real particular about the amounts or nothing, but a bunch of extra perlite down at the bottom. And I don't put the perlite all the way up to the top, because the perlite will float, and I really don't like the way that looks over time. If you want your plants to stay small, you use a smaller pot. If you want them to grow faster and larger, you use a larger pot. So that's pretty much the drainage layer right there. And then I just put some more right on top. And I'm going to be planting some monsteras in this. Also, by using the proper type of soil, which is peat moss or coco coir, when you got the hanging baskets hanging from a ceiling in the house, they're much lighter. So I'm only putting 2 of these in here. And I'm going to put a stake on them. And I'm going to have the leaves facing in the same direction for both plants that I'm putting in. Give it a little pat, just to Make sure it's nice and firm. I'm gonna stake this. Now you can use a moss pole, and if you use a moss pole, it will grow faster. The leaves will get larger quicker. Now I've been growing this variety for a while. I'm not gonna use a moss pole. I know just a regular stake will be just fine. And the reason that I made sure to have the leaves facing out in the same direction is because as this plant grows, all of the leaves are going to continue, like let's say this was the actual vine, all of the leaves are going to continue to come out of the vine on the same side, and all of the aerial roots are going to come out directly behind that. Each spot where a leaf grows, that's a node, and you'll get a leaf that comes out, and on the other side of the vine you're going to get an aerial root. Now if this was a moss pole, all of those aerial roots would grow and anchor right into the moss pole and get nutrients and moisture right from the pole as well. But I know this plant's going to grow quick enough, and these poles will be sufficient to keep a upright growth pattern for me, growth structure. And when we go in the house, I'll show what I mean about the aerial roots and everything for you. To help with insect control, I will use probably gonna pronounce it wrong, a synthetic fertilizer. Basically what this means is you put some of this on or in the soil, and over time it will actually get absorbed right into the plant itself and provide pretty much all the protection that you need for the plant. But be aware, this does take some time to work. I have another one here. It's just a different type. These are just little stakes. I've had these longer, so I'm going to use these. I'm just going to put one right in between the two plants here, stick it into the ground, and that's it. So this is neem oil, and you spray this right onto the plant itself, and it also can get absorbed over time. But this is a really weak solution. I also use this to keep my plants nice and shiny. But it does also provide some protection for insects and mildews and all sorts of stuff. It is actually a good product, but if you have an outbreak, this isn't really what you want to use by itself. You'd want to use some other type of systemic spray fertilizer to spray right at the areas that are infected. And you'd want to do that for well, you'd use it as directed, but you'd want to do it like twice a week for 2 or 3 weeks to make sure that you have taken care of the problem. As far as fertilization, when you're using a brand new fresh bag of potting mix, usually they'll have a slow release fertilizer. Those are those little balls of fertilizer. Those are mostly salt that gets sprayed with fertilizer, and the salt absorbs the liquid fertilizer, and then every time you water, a little bit of that salt dissolves and fertilizes the plant. So when you're using, you know, some fresh soil, or you just put in some of that slow release fertilizer, you can go a good 6 months or more before it's all used up. And every time you water, it's getting a little bit of that fertilizer, but it's also releasing some salt. So you do want to make sure that periodically when you water, that the water is draining right through and out down into this tray, so that you're flushing the soil to get rid of the excess salt. Now, these are tropical houseplants. I actually water my plants almost every day. You know, in their natural environment, they are, you know, it does rain every day in a tropical rainforest. Because of all the perlite and the good drainage, I don't have to worry about root rot. When you first put a small plant like this in, you don't have to give it quite as much water, and you can water more right around where the plant is, right where the root ball is. But I do also want to mention this is mostly peat moss, or this is cocoa coir. Cocoa coir and peat moss, it takes a lot to initially hydrate it, and this soil already is a little bit moist. But I'm going to go ahead and really put a lot of water in here right now. And I'm going to go ahead and give them some of this neem oil too. It's safe and secure from most insects and pests. It's got a large pot. We're not going to need to up pot it. It's got great drainage. The soil drains, the pot drains, and we got stakes already in here. So as it grows, we can secure it right to the stakes. not going to have to fertilize this for at least 6 months. And I'm going to water it almost every day. If I water it a lot and I see the water coming out of the bottom, that's when I'll skip a day or two. As far as if you ever heard let the soil dry out in between watering, they don't mean let your plant get bone dry. Think of a sponge. Submerge a sponge in water, wring it out as best as you can, where you can't get no more water out, but that sponge is still moist. That's when the soil is considered dry and it needs more water. You don't want the soil to become like a desert and be bone dry, because then you'll be damaging the roots. And the peat moss or coco coir has dried to the point where it's going to need a lot of water. If this wasn't already moist, I probably would have, this is a little less than a gallon. Not really sure. It might even just be like 2 liters here. But I probably would have filled this 3 times, maybe even 4. And it would have taken that much before any water came out of the bottom. No water came out of it, even with what I put in there, even with it already being moist. So seeing that we were just talking about watering, I guess now would be a good time to get into humidity. So what I've come to realize is that it's more important to have your humidity to be constant, to keep it at the same level as much as possible. You don't want fluctuations. I don't use humidifiers, but I do have quite a few fish tanks, and a bunch of them are not covered. I don't like the humidifiers because if you don't keep up on it, you fill it up, you let it run for a day or two, and then they're empty, and you leave it empty for a day or two, you get wild fluctuations in the humidity. And I also don't like spraying my plants with a mister, like a water bottle. There's several reasons I don't like doing that. One, you're actually only increasing the humidity while you're spraying the plant. As soon as you're done spraying the plant, that humidity level just plummets. But also, you do have some tiny little droplets of water all over that plant, and that can cause some problems. The big one, the visual one, is you can have water spots on your leaves. I do not like water spots on my leaves. But also that can promote mold and fungus and insects as well. So my humidity level actually only stays to about 40%, and that is sufficient. My plants do not appear to have any issues at all with low humidity. But I do also water my plants almost every day, and not every plant gets watered every day. But by doing that, that's increasing the amount of humidity too. If I water my plants and then I leave for the weekend, when I get back and they haven't been watered for 2 or 3 days, I'll notice about a 10% drop in the humidity level in this room. And as soon as I water them again, all those plants, the humidity level goes right back up and it stays constant, right at about 40 to 50%. So yeah, just keep the humidity constant. The plant will adjust. Now you might bring a plant home that's been somewhere where it's been in real high humidity and you'll see some issues, but just let the plant grow, let it be, and over time it will adjust. The only pests that I really have a problem with here are spider mites. And it seems to only be with the new plants that I bring in, even though I spray them down with that neem oil initially. It's the newest plants, and this is one of my newer plants right here, and I don't know how well it's going to show up, but I do have some spider mites, and I will show you how I will take care of that problem as well as get the leaves nice and shiny. Let's go around to the other side of the room. Maybe I can get a better view of it. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if it's going to show up on the camera, but I do have spider mites. You can see the web. So I'm just going to use some of the neem oil, spray it onto a paper towel, and this is all natural too. Comes from the neem tree. And the first thing that I'm going to do is get right where I see those webs. Make sure I get that area real good. So I think I pretty much went around and got the actual webs and where the majority of them were. I'm going to throw that in the trash. And I'm going to start at the bottom. And I'm going to hit every single leaf. Both sides. Sure, I'll keep an eye on the plant. I might have to do this again relatively soon. But when I'm doing this just to keep my plants nice and shiny, I only do it maybe, I don't know, a few times a year. Usually it's right before I do like a plant room tour, or if I got some plants right next to a tank or something that I'm making a video on, I'll do that to make the plants look shinier. That's why they look so shiny. And you know, before I do a video and I know there's going to be plants in a shot, I'll trim off some of the leaves that maybe are turning brown and stuff. It's, you know, I'm making a video, so I do clean the plants up a little bit before I actually make the video. But I don't use filters or nothing, you know, to change the color or the shininess or anything like that. What you see is what it is. But I will admit, some of the lights that I have in the fish tanks, I got 2 tanks with really cheap, they're just LED shop lights, and I will use a filter sometimes on them to try and make the fish look closer to what they actually look like in real life. You know, when I have other lights on, I gotta turn all the lights off when I'm doing the fish tanks to try to get rid of the reflections. And then when I'm just using the light that's right above the tank, sometimes they come out looking totally different than what they actually look like. So, but I try not to use filters when I film stuff. I want you to see what the stuff actually looks like. But I have used filters on particularly 2 of the tanks. I got some orange fish. They're a nice, shiny, bright orange, but for some reason with that light, when I film them, they come out a real dull orange. Nothing like how beautiful they actually look. And I keep throwing out that paper towel and getting a new one because, you know, it could be contaminated with those spider mites right on it, and I don't want to move it to other leaves. And I always make sure I'm using a fresh paper towel when I go from one plant to the next. Now, where this plant was over there, it was touching another plant. So I am definitely going to make sure I also get over there and clean up those leaves where I know they were touching. Just so if any of these guys had migrated over to the other plant, I'm taking care of them. But those plants actually are all pretty well protected because of the fertilizer the insecticide that I put into the soil. And it gets absorbed right up into the plant. And I did put some of that insecticide into this soil, but like I said, it can take months before it actually is effective. So I gotta do stuff like this. And by wiping your plants off, these leaves, getting the dust off of them and stuff, it helps with it's the plant's ability to engage in photosynthesis as well, to get all those sugars and starches and stuff from the light through photosynthesis. All right, so I'm gonna go over and do that other plant. I don't see any of them on it, but they were touching, so you really can't see. These guys are so small. And this is to show you, this plant looks kind of dull. This leaf is kind of dull, and when we're done wiping this oil on there, it's got some added protection. Not much, but it's gonna be nice and shiny, and we're going to increase the efficiency of the leaf to engage in photosynthesis. Much shinier, much more bright. Now it is still a little damp, but believe it or not, that oil is going to actually, that's very close to what it's going to look like. I guess I can take the time and do some of these monsteras behind me. So here, I'll show you how they look. And these have been wiped down not too long ago, but I'm going to do it again just so you can see how they look. This is something that you can do right before you have company or something come over to really make your house plants pop. So now, as you can see, and it's been, I don't know, maybe 10-15 minutes, so these leaves are dry. So this is actually how they're going to stay looking. And they're nice and shiny. They look greener. I hope they do through the camera. They do to me. They almost look fake. That's how nice they look. For the lighting, I am not using LEDs. I'm using, the fixture really don't matter, but I'm using a high output fluorescent bulb. They're called T5s, and they're 6400K. I'm using these instead of LEDs. LEDs would have cost a little bit more initially, but you would save money over time on the electric. And it's, you know, it is a little better for the environment too, using less electric. But for the way that these look, I think the light looks much more natural, and it's much better for me for filming. But I have my lighting in the center of the room. I don't have good light that comes through these windows. My house is surrounded by trees, and I don't get a lot of exposure in the house. So I have my lights in the center of the room at the ceiling. So all my plants grow out towards the center of the room, so they look better when you're walking around the house. Now, if you're not using supplemental lighting and you have plenty of free, beautiful sunlight that filters through into your house. So I don't spin my plants to make them grow in every direction. I keep my plants stationary and let them grow and be efficient on how the leaves grow and collect the available light. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this around. So let's say there was no light at the ceiling, and this is in front of a window, and the window's behind the plant. And this is how the plant grew, and you don't spin it, you just let it stay like that. Well, before you have company come over, so then you spin it, and it looks nice and lush and beautiful growing out towards you. I just don't like spinning my plants because I like them to be 100% effective in gathering up all the available light that they have to that spot where they're sitting. So right here I have some golden pothos growing out of a pot, which is how you'll normally see these. A lot of different types of pothos and philodendron. And when you grow them out of a pot, that's not their natural way they grow. They usually grow up trees and stuff. And when you grow them like this, the leaves will stay small and they'll be spaced farther apart. But if you look over here, can you hear Ollie in the background? He's got a lot to say. But if you look over here, this is also a golden pothos growing on a moss pole with much larger leaves. And these leaves can actually, over time, get 2 foot long and have fenestrations, you know, slits in them, just like the monsteras. What I'm doing here is I'm growing it out of a moss pole that stays moist. I can keep this moist. And as it grows up the pole, the leaves will keep getting larger and larger. And I have two different segments here, two different pieces of pole attached to each other. And now that it's all the way up to the top here, it's ready for me down here where the two poles come in contact with each other to remove them. See? To remove this and cut this right here, cut this vine, and then stick this into another pot and put another extension at the top so the vine can continue to grow and the leaves can keep getting larger and larger. And part of the reason why it does that, why they keep getting larger and larger, is just like with the Monstera we were looking at earlier. This is an aerial root right here. They'll grow their aerial roots out right into the moss. The pole actually becomes an extension of the pot, and this moss is all full of root, and it's able to take up extra nutrients and moisture. And you can grow your plants much larger and use up less space, you know, growing them up like that. Something else that you can do is grow houseplants right out of your aquariums. If you do, what I would recommend is taking a cutting, putting it into a jar or something with some water, and let that spot where you cut it, the wound, let that have a chance to heal and grow new roots. You want to do that just to make sure that it's not releasing any sap out of that fresh wound that could be toxic to any of your tank mates that are in the aquarium. And there are some great advantages to growing your houseplants directly out of the water. The houseplants will actually absorb the ammonia, nitrites, and nitrates right out of the water for you. So you don't have to do as many water changes to keep the excess nutrients under control. But you don't want to get a plant, take it out of a pot and wash or wipe off all of the soil from the roots and stick it into the fish tank, because those roots did not grow in water, pure water like that. So the plant will get root rot and die and just rot away. But if the roots are grown initially in water, you'll be able to let them just continue to grow and they'll be just fine. I've been doing it for a while now. And the roots look kind of cool in the tank as well, growing down into the tank. Right here, these are mostly Monstera roots growing down into that tank. And over here, I have some pothos and arrowhead plant. And I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it, but those are their roots right there. But it gives a whole new dynamic to the tanks and the house plants and everything, having the stuff grow right out. I think it looks really cool.